It was Wednesday morning, January 8th, 10:30 a.m. Jen and I decided to take the kids to Sky Zone Trampoline Park, a massive indoor trampoline spot to run around after being cooped up with their catatonic parents just trying to navigate literally any next steps after the insanity of the last 24 hours. They ran around a completely empty warehouse space because all other kids were enjoying being at just another day of school. We sat there weeping. Together, as a young man who worked there walked up and asked us if our home had been in the Palisades. We said it was, and without missing a beat, he said, "Can I give you a pizza?" This past year was formative. It has changed our community forever. Either your home was affected, your community centers were affected, the person sitting next to you right now was affected, the atmosphere of Southern California itself, and I'm not even talking about all the air filters because of the particle debris, the very aura of Southern California was affected. This year changed us. And I know many of you might be sitting there saying, "Yes, Rabbi, I know, and there's a Jewish stereotype that Jews are anxious. We make jokes about it. We worry if there's enough food on the table, even when there's clearly enough. We call our families 3 times in one afternoon just to check in. We lie awake at night making contingency plans for the things that were never supposed to happen." And it's funny because it's true. Anxiety has almost become a Jewish punchline. But maybe the punchline hides a deeper truth. Anxiety isn't just a stereotype we laugh about, but it's a spiritual reflex that actually belongs at the heart of what it means to be Jewish. For many of us, we experience the polarizing, hyper-dramatized version of what I would like to call the 2 soul reflexes of survival: hope and anxiety. Not just abstract ideas, they're spiritual reflexes shaping the way we endure, the way we'll rebuild, how we carry one another. They're simultaneous realities of being human after tragedy. The Torah begins not with calm, but with chaos. Tohu vavohu, darkness hovering over the deep. It's a scene of anxiety. Nothing is stable, nothing is defined, nothing is certain. Tohu vavohu is more than ancient poetry. It's a description of what anxiety feels like. A swirling inside your chest, an inability to see what comes next. The future is terrifyingly open with no guarantee of shape or direction. The rabbis tell us this is where creation begins. Not in clarity, but in confusion. Not in serenity, but in trembling. I must admit, I had read this story countless times, taught it year after year, and never could I visualize Tohu Vavohu. Now I see Tohu Vavohu. I see it in the image pierced in my mind. The first time I went to our home and saw the Kiddush cup from Jen and my wedding, an heirloom that my in-laws also used at their wedding, broken in 2 pieces sitting amongst the ash. I see it in the shell of buildings lining partial streets of Sunset, a reminder of what we lost. I see it in those first days when we would call each other at 2 a.m. because we remembered another person to check in on with no concept of time at all. And then into the chaos, we hear a single phrase, Yehi Or, let there be light. We were still a community. We knew we would rebuild even in those first moments, and look at how far we have come in these first months when it comes to healing one another and being here. Notice what happens. The darkness is not erased. A mythical God does not come and make the void disappear. Nothing can silence anxiety. Instead, God introduces a new something into the midst: light. A counterbalance, a spark, a possibility. Rosh Hashanah is our story of recreation, something this community now knows all too well. We will continue to be a pillar of the Palisades and beyond. We will find light that comes from our chaos. We will shine onto this world. That is hope. Not certainty, not perfection, just a first fragile glimpse of something possible. Creation in this telling is not a banishment of chaos, but a juxtaposition with the light. Day and night, darkness and brightness, anxiety and hope woven together. The Torah insists the world is not made in spite of disorder, but alongside disorder. And this is not just how the world begins, it's how Jewish life has always been lived. And here's the key. These reflexes are not sequential. You don't finish anxiety and then arrive at hope. They're simultaneous realities. The darkness doesn't disappear when the light arrives. They coexist. Creation is born in the tension of these two. Creation is the product of these two charges of polarity, the charge between hope and anxiety. The juxtaposition is where Jewish life is lived. And many of us are brought to believe that to achieve balance, to overcome difficulties, we need to remove anxiety from our lives. We need to assume that healing means the disappearance of those frustrations, the moving on to finally being free from fear. But that version of the world would rob us from a crucial truth. Our tradition shares in the words of Proverbs, happy is the anxious one. Anxiety is not a proof of brokenness, it's a proof of caring. It's a part of us that refuses to go numb, the part that remembers what matters most. To imagine that wholeness only comes when anxiety disappears is to imagine a life without concern, without vigilance, and a life without love. Anxiety is not only key, it's celebrated. Our tradition insists on something different. Wholeness does not come from silencing anxiety. It comes from holding it and hope together, feeling the fullness of that experience as sacred simultaneous reflexes. I was given this notion of hope and anxiety from a dear professor, Rabbi Dr. Michael Marmer. And he led me to that proverb text, but I must admit, there is a second sentence. Happy is the anxious one, but the one who hardens their heart falls into misfortune. We often would read that as a warning. But what if it's an invitation instead? Because what if misfortune in our tradition, it's not about hardship, it's about the absence of a godly world. To harden our heart is to cut ourselves off from covenant and from compassion, from divine pulse of life. And what is fortune in our tradition? It's not money or comfort. It's the experience of God's nearness, of a life filled with blessing, of communal covenant. Fortune is the restoration of hope. So the proverb should be reframed. Happy is the one who is anxious, for the hardened heart doesn't know a godly world. And the Hebrew here makes it even sharper. In that phrase, the word for anxious is actually pachad, which is the same word we translate as fear. We usually imagine pachad as something also to overcome, to cast out. But here the text insists pachad is part of blessing. Why? Because fear itself has a sacred role to play. Pachad is not only paralyzing, pachad sharpens, pachad guards, pachad protects us. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov deepened this truth when he teaches, Kol ha'ulam kulo gesher tsar me'od. V'ha'ikar lo lechit pached klal. The whole world is a very narrow bridge. And the main thing is to not make yourself afraid. Now, many of us know this as song, but most of you sing it wrong. We usually sing lo lefached, don't be afraid, but the original was lo lechit pached, reflective, don't make yourself afraid. He spoke of how we walk the journey of life across a narrow bridge, not unaware of the dangers. Anxiety is a reflex here, and it's real. Your anxiety becomes the guardrails of that narrow bridge, allowing you to confidently walk without the same concern for each side. It keeps you aware and careful and alive. But, and this is Rabbi Nachman's key, do not let pachad paralyze you. Do not turn inward and make yourself more afraid than you already are. Let anxiety be your guide, but not your shackle. Use it to navigate and to progress. Anxiety is the guardrail of life's narrow bridge. Think about those moments that define a life. Asking for a raise, proposing to a partner, leaving behind a steady job to start something new. Each one, anxiety, anxiety, anxiety. Your heart races, your voice shakes, you doubt yourself, and yet those very moments are when the door opens to the future. And the body knows this truth too. Have you ever felt your muscles trembling during or after a workout? That trembling is not weakness. It's the signal of growth. Without that stress, there is no strength. Without it, there's only atrophy. The muscle fibers tear and rebuild together. Anxiety is something to harness, not shun. It's the very condition of growth. So it is with our lives as well. A life without trembling may feel safe, but you do not grow. Growth requires walking into anxious places, letting them shape us, trusting the strength will emerge on the other side. But what about when the anxiety is too big for one person to hold? That's when community comes in. Anxiety in an individual sharpens caution and resolve, but anxiety shared across community is different. It becomes distributed, carried together, and made manageable. Community doesn't erase your trembling, but in this space, it steadies it. All these months later, many of us can live whole days filled with tasks and appointments and still find ourselves ambushed by a memory. A random commercial on TV, a smell, a passing image, and suddenly the trauma is back in our minds. We see one thing and remember that box in the garage that we never got around to opening. And grief comes rushing back in. Or you feel a twinge of jealousy when you see someone cherishing keepsakes and heirlooms because you no longer have yours. This loss isn't specific to fires this past year. So many of us have these voids in different spaces, the void of a loved one, the absence of a voice at the table, or the weight of illness bearing down. Grief takes many forms, but it always lingers. It always finds its way back in the room, and it immediately floods us with sadness. And that translates to anxiety about when we feel healed. I'm surprised by that anxiety when I stand with a couple under the chuppah and I talk to them about the importance of keepsakes from their wedding day. I say the photographs, the Kiddush cup, the ketubah, the glass they so jubilantly shattered as I quietly feel my heart shatter all over again. I bless them with that future, even knowing what it feels like to lose the things you always thought you would hold. That tension doesn't go away. It lingers. Last week, I had the privilege to be on Capitol Hill lobbying on behalf of this community and others that have experienced disaster, making sure that meaningful support was something that we could not only rely on, but should rely on. And when brainstorming how to tell our story, how to share our truth, I was reminded by a dear friend of the nuanced difference between classic mythological hero's journey and the lesser understood journey of trauma and survival. The hero begins reluctant. It wasn't supposed to be me, they say. The reluctant, it's their own kind of anxiety, fear of failing, fear of stepping into a role too large to bear. But then in all the good stories, a turning point comes. The hero says, but here I am, and anxiety gives way to hope. Hope they can rise to the challenge. Hope that courage is stronger than fear. The hero's arc bends towards hope, and the story ends in triumph. But the trauma journey is different. It doesn't begin with choice. It begins with rupture. With loss you never asked for and disruption you never wanted. And here the anxiety is heavier. Not reluctance, but survival. Not can I do this, but how will I endure this? Anxiety doesn't vanish with one brave step. It stays, it lingers, and yet alongside it, hope refuses to be silenced. Hope that tomorrow will come. Hope that a community is there to hold you. Hope that even in the ruins there can be rebuilding. The trauma journey is not hope instead of anxiety, but hope with anxiety, both at once, both tugging at the heart in every single step. The hero's arc is anxiety yields, hope wins. The survivor's arc is anxiety remains and hope still rises. In many ways, that second story, the story of carrying both anxiety and hope as simultaneous realities, that's the Jewish story. Even here, anxiety is the tether. It's a way to stay connected to the world. It isn't going to vanish, but it can be carried and shared. The exhaustive steps of surviving our traumas, all of that weighs heavy on each one of us. And then, out of nowhere, a moment of ease. A bright and carefree laugh with your kids, a meal with friends who get it, a chance to sit among a community, a glimpse of normalcy. And that math never works out, by the way. The hardship will always seem more numerous. But our tradition insists that blessings, though fewer, are not weaker. Even the smallest spark of hope can balance the scale, giving us footing again. This past year has shown us how fragile life can be. Just how that narrow bridge may suddenly make us realize how high up we really are. But it's also shown us what our tradition has known since the first verses of Torah, that creation is born out of chaos and light, trembling and courage, anxiety and hope. Creation is not despite our anxieties. Creation is because of them. Hope, anxiety, sacred reflexes for us to lean on. The hero's journey and the trauma journey, they are not opposites. They are Jewish. To be Jewish is to be lived in this very juxtaposition, to tremble and to hope, to carry anxiety and to nurture courage, to feel the chaos and to speak light. That juxtaposition is not just a part of our story. It is our story. And it's what this experience of life and being Jewish is all about. Shana Tova, my dear sweet Kehila.